myself off the floor.
Welcome to Difficult Conversations About Beauty. My name is Anita East, and I'm a nurse practitioner specialising in aesthetic, skin, and integrative medicine. I'm so delighted to have you here. But can I get you to do me a favour and just look around you out there? It can be super confusing trying to work out what's true and what's not in this world of beauty and health. So during each episode, we seek to dispel the myths, find the truth, and empower one another with ready-to-implement advice that will make your life so much better than before you started listening. Just as a reminder, the podcast is not intended as a substitute for the medical advice of legitimate healthcare practitioners. The listener should regularly consult a healthcare practitioner in matters relating to their health, particularly with respect to any symptoms that may require diagnosis or medical attention. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy. Excellent. So I'm here with my gorgeous friend, Dr. Agnes. Agnes, I am so excited to have you here today.
I'm really excited too, Anita. Thanks so much for having me. I've seen some of your podcasts and they're fantastic. So I was really looking forward to this one. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Difficult Conversations About Beauty is absolutely thrilled that you're here with us today because these are all hugely poignant discussions that we have on our podcast. And I think one of the most important ones that we're going to be broaching today with you is about regenerative health and how our listeners can actually take their own health in their own hands and take control of it. So can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
So I am a cosmetic and nutritional medicine practitioner. So I combine cosmetic treatments with internal health. And the way I got into this, it really started in my late teens, and it was because of my own personal health challenges, which began actually in early childhood, but it wasn't until my late teens that I realized there was a clear connection between the food I was eating and the symptoms that I was experiencing, and they were really starting to affect my quality of life. So and baffling the doctors as well. So that was really quite frustrating. There was a sense of helplessness, and so I started to look for answers myself. And this is we're talking the 90s, so it's a long time ago, late 80s, early 90s, and along that path, I really went down the nutritional medicine path already at that time. I was lucky actually, because when the symptoms started, it was all gut. They were mainly gut symptoms, but food intolerances, a lot of inflammatory symptoms. And then at the worst of it, it was at the addition of severe joint pain. So quite debilitating joint pain, days where I couldn't breathe or couldn't walk. So and I was quite young. This is when I started medicine, and most doctors were they couldn't figure out what was going on. They were attributing it to stress, which of course we know that autoimmune conditions are exacerbated by stress, but also by food. That wasn't well known, and that link wasn't really established at that stage. But I definitely felt that was what was happening with me. So, and while the diagnosis wasn't made for many years, I needed to find my own solutions and find the ones that work for me.
Absolutely.
So there wasn't much available at that time. What was available was really flawed. There was still the food pyramid, the old food pyramid with 6 servings of carbohydrates a day, and that includes cereals and muesli bars and rice. And so I was following that, and it really wasn't making that much of a difference. I was really struggling with symptoms. But at that time, that link in the traditional medicine community, that wasn't well established. So my specialists were still saying there is no evidence to suggest that link between food and the symptoms that you're having. This is a long time ago. And so and being in my early 20s, I actually was quite happy to hear that, because changing your diet is hard. and especially in your early 20s. So
Oh,
it
it's
took a little
so
while.
hard.
It's incredibly hard. You want to eat what your friends are eating. You want to be doing what others are doing. It's not that easy. You have to hit that pain point, I suppose, to really make the change. And even though, and mine was always fluctuating, so there were times when everything was fine. So I just ride through the bad times. But eventually I kept tweaking my health program, and it would have been the late 1990s, because initially there was no internet, so I couldn't find the information. But late 1990s, early 2000s, a lot was coming through. And as I kept tweaking my own health plan, I was really seeing significant benefits. And so when I finished my general practice training and I started, my fellowship, I started cosmetic medicine, I immediately introduced nutritional medicine as well, because I knew that even though patients were coming in with wrinkles or volume loss, I could see that they were metabolically unhealthy, they had autoimmune diseases, they had a whole range of issues that were contributing to the skin signs and the sometimes potentially rapid aging. So I introduced nutritional medicine and integrative medicine for a couple of years as well. And so that's over the years, what I've been doing is developing personalized nutrition plans. I actually moved away from the integrative and functional medicine side of things, and for many reasons, but I probably won't go into it now. But I moved towards nutritional medicine because I really saw the benefits and that link between how food can be used as a therapeutic, and really a lot of the literature is pointing to it. So here I
Wow.
am. So that's what I do: personalized nutrition plans and nutrients alongside them. So yeah.
Wow. And what was back in, say, for example, the 90s, when you're, in med school and you were finishing up, what was the first thing that you changed in terms of, you said that you started to dabble with changing your nutrition. What was the first thing that you went, probably your intuition said, let's cut that out?
Yeah, so I was still going through that low fat, high carb at the time that I was in medicine, but I got really lucky because so I had 3 specialists and a GP, and there was a time when my GP was away and I saw a GP who, this was just by chance, he gave me a book that talked about the interaction, the effect of food on your health and diet and lifestyle on your health. So that book really was what changed it all for me. At that time, we now have the paleo diet, which is really based around the whole foods diet. The paleo diet in the early 2000s, or late 1990s, was still called the Neanderthal diet. So
That's right.
that's right. So that was removing grains, gluten, dairy, legumes I was still eating at that time. And every time I followed it by the book, symptoms resolved. And whenever I slipped up, which I did, they came back. So it was clear to me. By the time I finished medicine, it was very clear to me what works, what some safe, and if there are some safe and effective strategies. But it was really removing gluten, dairy, processed foods. That's what makes the biggest difference.
Wow. And kind of putting it down to those 3 food groups, if you like, gluten, dairy, and processed foods, they don't feel that large a mountain to have to climb, because now in 2024, we do have so many other dietary options, don't we? And so even if you were to start to eliminate one, you'd probably see an improvement in symptoms or just in your general health and well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true. And it would just be, everyone's different in their tolerance to these foods. I mean, processed foods, and especially the ultra processed foods, are harmful across the board. There's no doubt about that. The evidence is there. Our declining health is largely the result of diet, lifestyle, and an extreme exposure to toxins, but environmental and dietary toxins. So removing or reducing processed foods would be the first step. And that is hard, but you take it one meal at a time. So find a meal that you really enjoy for breakfast that doesn't involve processed foods, or minimally processed foods only. It's already going to make a difference to your health. when it comes to dairy and gluten, there is a lot of controversy about this, and practitioners generally don't like to tell people not to eat certain foods. But what I've seen in my practice is that there is a range of tolerances to, or intolerance. How well you tolerate gluten depends on a number of factors, and the genetic factors and age, I think, seem to be the biggest factors. So someone who is younger tends to be able to repair the damage that's caused by gluten in everyone. Someone who is older and has genes that are that cause autoimmune disease find it much harder to repair that damage. So it's really about your repair mechanisms and what kind of inflammatory process you're predisposed to, as to whether that is a food component that you would need to avoid right now. So not everyone needs to avoid gluten. There's a small percentage of people who can tolerate it, but I do feel that, or what I can see in my practice is that with time, eventually everyone develops an intolerance to it because the repair mechanisms decline with age.
Especially with age. Yes.
Yeah.
So what's really interesting is, so you mentioned before that you then started to create nutrients.
Yes.
So tell us about that, because that sounds fascinating.
So what led me to that is I was using supplements from various companies alongside my integrative practice. And there was a point at which I had an exacerbation of my symptoms as a result. Actually, I can share it with you, as a result of silicone implants. So I ended up with implant disease, and it was extreme. I had to take 8 months off work. It was very intense. Now, in that time, and I didn't want to link the two, I can tell you that much. I wanted to keep them. So what I did at that time is that was when I really started to look at the foundational processes, because at that point I had HPA axis dysfunction, severe inflammatory symptoms, brain fog. My body had changed significantly within a very short period of time. And the most uncomfortable symptom was weight gain. So that's what I really wanted to address. So when I was looking at that science, that new research that was coming out, which was perfectly timed, I found that there were these components, these physiological processes. There's a lot of research about it: dysbiosis, inflammation, mitochondrial function, metabolic health, hormonal balance, and neurological function. And that if these processes are supported and dysbiosis is reduced and inflammation is reduced, then the magic happens. And so what I looked at is what I need to take to make that happen. And when I was looking at the supplements that I was already using in my practice, they fell short, really, for me, because I would need to take 60 different capsules a day.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, many of them have maltodextrin in them and other excipients that at that point I found out actually can cause dysbiosis, can worsen inflammation. People do have intolerance to these additives that are used in the processing of these nutrients. So I went, and initially I actually sourced pure form nutrients from around the world to help myself, to help reduce this inflammation without removing the implants. And it worked. It did work. So it was another 2 years before I removed the implants, but it worked very rapidly. My patients saw me come off a walking stick. I was on a walking stick as a result of joint pain, quite severe and extensive. And they saw me lose weight very rapidly, because when you reduce the inflammation, your metabolism improves. So my patients wanted what I was having, and that's when I looked at producing nutrients to address everything, but ones that are you can't produce nutrients without excipients. It's very, very hard to do. All of them have something in that processing, but it took 2 years to find the right ones to be able to produce a product that I can use, and I'm quite sensitive to everything, and a product that I was happy to take out to other clinics. So yeah, and so I did find that my patients were improving quite rapidly, quite more so with just diet alone.
Wow. So you were supporting their changes in diet and lifestyle with the nutrients that you developed. So let's go first of all to what what we see as a chronic rise, because this is, I really want to get back to these nutrients because I think it's fascinating, but obviously you're talking about your story, and your story is not dissimilar to many, many others that we come across in our daily practice as clinicians, but also friends, family, ourselves. So tell me what your thoughts are about the rise in chronic conditions that we're seeing today.
Yeah, so they're certainly increasing, and they're increasing dramatically, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. And one of the problems, I think, one of the issues is that they're believed to just be a normal part of aging. So a lot of people will be diagnosed with something, they'll be given medications. They're not always effective in fully managing the symptoms, but they're told that that's just a normal part of aging.
Mm.
And the reason for this is that 200 years ago, we were only living to the age of 30, whereas now medicine and sanitation and antibiotics have meant that we are living longer, but we're developing chronic conditions. So the initial belief is that these chronic conditions are because of the aging process, but that belief is quite flawed. And the evidence for it being flawed is that children are developing chronic conditions. So if it was just an age-related process, we wouldn't have 25% of school-aged children with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, unheard of until recently in children. For that, type 2 diabetes is a disease of over 40-year-olds. Really, it's not something, but there's now seeing it in children. Autoimmune conditions. So the rise is there. It's happening in the younger population, and so that really points to the fact that there is something else going on. That's one bit of evidence. Another bit of evidence is the blue zones of the world, where you have supercentenarians, where they're living well beyond 100 years old. And the big difference in those communities is their diet is largely unprocessed. They make everything from scratch, but that's just one part of the process. There are about 5, key pillars of health. They move more, so they're not sitting in front of the TV. They're socially connected. They have a real purpose in the community. They take care of the grandchildren. They are respected. They're not how would I say, decaying really in an environment that's very isolated, and that seems to be happening in the Western populations more and more. And so they have a sense of purpose. They lead an active lifestyle. So this is really what is the evidence that points to chronic diseases not necessarily being because of aging, but because of our ultra-processed food, because of our sedentary lifestyle, extreme stress. Even our priorities as well. We're overscheduled. We're very much influenced by our environment, which is bombarding us with mixed messages. And so people are generally wanting more, but it isn't necessarily bringing a quality of life.
I must admit, when you were just talking then about the blue zones and this, the people who are living beyond their hundreds and so forth, and their type of lifestyle, eating good food, non-processed, moving about, being respected, being needed, being required, being important members of society, being connected. And it made me quite emotional to think that that's just not us. We are, and when I say us, I'm talking specifically about the Western world in terms of Australia. Here we are, but we're just, like you said, we're so overscheduled. We're so focused on being everything for everyone and hustling,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know. It's sad, isn't it, really?
It is sad. It is sad that the things that warrant accolade tend to be material things or achievements, as opposed to sharing a beautiful meal with family and friends and being there for our children and being there for our parents and so forth. So, wow.
I know. And you think about it, and I don't know if you've been to any of these places. My family comes from a village in Poland, so I go there. I absolutely love it. No one cares about the size of their nose there.
Yes.
No one. They don't care. They care about whether their neighbor is well, whether
Well,
the old woman next door needs help because her family's away. So it's just there's a different way of there are different priorities, and I think the stress that we're experiencing has has a huge impact. The pressure on us has a huge impact on our health. So that's part of the reason for the the rise in chronic conditions. It's our Western diet and lifestyle. That's the reality of it. So it's about how do you live in this world in a way that in our world, because we're not all going to move to the blue zones or the villages, how do we live in this world in a way that works for us? Yeah.
So the rise in chronic conditions, we see that in varying forms, don't we, in our
Mm.
clinical practice?
Mm.
And you mentioned a couple of things, especially with children, type 2 diabetes increasing, obviously obesity, other autoimmune conditions. What are the main things that we tend to see in our clinical practice in aesthetics and skin medicine?
So as you know, most our patients come to us for the skin issues, so for the dermatological problems. And what I commonly see, and increasingly so, is rosacea, psoriasis. Now, these are dermatological conditions that need to be managed alongside a dermatologist's management as well. But we have rosacea, psoriasis, hair loss. That's so many people are suffering from hair loss. That's usually related. So these are usually related to something underlying, and I'll go through that in a sec. But rapid aging as well, acne, and skin reactivity, severe skin reactivity, which is also increasing. The pandemic has brought along a whole new area of skin issues, I think, from what I can see. And that is because our immune function has changed to some degree. And so, but the thing is, when someone presents with these conditions, they're usually associated with something underlying. So we've all heard of the gut-skin connection, and that's really quite clear. And what that refers to is how the gut microbiome communicates with the skin, and it does that in a very sophisticated way. These are signals that are produced, are certain metabolites that are produced by the gut microbiome depending on what we eat and depending on the environment in our body. And these signals will then influence immune function. And then these immune signals, alongside the microbial signals, will influence skin health. So they travel through the bloodstream to the skin to influence immune function within the skin. So if you're eating a diet that works for your microbiome, that produces, so that's one in a diet that's high in fiber, in polyphenols, which are found in brightly colored fruit and vegetables, omega-3 fatty acids and other healthy fats, then you are producing a very healthy gut microbiome, and then they're producing very healthy metabolites or signals that communicate with the immune system. Because 80% of the immune system is located along the length of the gastrointestinal tract. That's a lot. So that communication really does influence how our immune system and our immune functions systemically. And so if you're eating the right diet, the signals that are being transmitted to the skin are anti-inflammatory signals, and the metabolic signals, because the inflammation or immune function really also influences metabolism. So the metabolic signals are improved, and that's usually got to do with blood sugar control. So just to give you an example as far as how we know that the links that are already established between food and skin disorders, we have acne. So the link between dairy and sugar and acne, and the way through which that happens is by the modifications at the level of the gut microbiome and the gut wall, and then the signals that are transmitted to the skin from there. So it's not just that. There are other examples. I mean, there's rosacea, which is usually related to a processed diet causing changes in the gut microbiome, or a diet that's high in histamine, and then histamine is transmitted to the skin, causing the symptoms of redness and flushing. So that connection is definitely there, and the brain is also involved. So the skin and the gut and the skin communicate with the brain, and the brain communicates with both of those. So if you're stressed, it will affect your skin. So we're seeing patients coming in with these skin signs and symptoms, but you can almost certainly, you can almost be certain that there are gut issues, especially if they're eating a processed diet or just a standard Western diet. There's some degree of inflammation, and that can vary for people. So it can be an autoimmune type of inflammation or an allergic type of inflammation or just a basic inflammatory response. So there's more beneath the surface, and there are these key physiological processes or cellular and systemic processes that are occurring that if they're addressed, then you have a much better chance of improving outcomes with the external signs and symptoms that we're seeing.
Yeah, wow, wow. And it is there, we are seeing, we're hearing more about these increased, this sudden rise in chronic conditions. It's not sudden, it's been around for, like you say, but we're more aware of it. We're definitely more aware of hearing people saying that they're having issues with whether or not be their skin, because to be fair, your skin is your largest organ. So if there is something happening inside, and I've written down here that 80% of our immune system is in our gut. Now that's fascinating what you just said then, because that's something I hadn't ever visualized. I haven't ever considered in the past. And to think that then whatever we're putting in our mouth, whatever nutrients or lack of nutrients we're actually consuming, is affecting directly 80% of our immune system.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
That's right. So yeah, that was something that really, really surprised me. And as soon as you understand that link, you can't ignore the impact that food has on our health.
That's right. So in saying that, let's talk about the messages out there that aren't from you, aren't from us, but the messages out there that manipulate, that don't work.
Yeah, there's plenty. There's more of those than the ones that actually do work, unfortunately. So the big ones that I find really are very hard to break through are the messages of everything in moderation, because you want a balanced life. But one thing that people may not understand is that even one processed meal will switch the gut microbiome to an abnormal one, where you have more pathogenic species that are producing inflammatory signals that are disrupting your metabolism, your hormones, your brain. So even one meal in someone who is susceptible to it, and everyone will have like I said earlier, everyone will have some degree of damage or some degree of change, but everyone's different in how they repair that and how they respond to that. So if someone has any autoimmune conditions or has any chronic conditions, they're much more susceptible to the foods that they eat. So those messages of everything in moderation, or the other one is, embracing your curves, which I think is fantastic. And I think the message itself is brilliant. It's needed because, well, you've written the book, haven't you? Beautiful, unique faces, where we need to embrace our uniqueness and have healthy bodies, no matter whatever that shape may be or size. That's fine. But that message came from a company, and I won't say the name, 20 years ago. And
I love this story. I'm just going to interrupt and say I love this story.
Yeah,
oh
so
my
it's
goodness.
fascinating. Did the research on this one, because that message was about embracing your curves and body positivity, which is great. I agree with that. There are too many women, actually almost everyone I speak to has something they're not happy about with their bodies, even the most perfect of people. And so that's terrible that that's happening. So this message appeared to be great, but that same company has many subsidiary companies, and one of the subsidiary companies and their marketing that was released the same year that the body positivity campaign was released was about indulging yourself in their special ice creams, and you deserve an indulgence. And so you had a group of people who were rebelling against the norms of beauty, which is fine, but then they were told, here you go, you deserve an indulgence. But do you deserve obesity? Do you deserve diabetes? Do you deserve depression? So if we're embracing an unhealthy body, then we're embracing all of these chronic illnesses. And that's what's happened in the last 20 years. There's been an increase in overweight and obesity by 10%. I mean, that's huge. It's huge. And from what I see in my practice, even the patients who come in for skin conditions, and I always, if I if I see that someone could benefit from addressing internal health, I always ask a little bit more about that. Generally, if they're unwell, if they're overweight or obese, they're generally not happy about it, but they just don't know what the solutions are, and it's because of the mixed messages. There's so much out there. It's just a lot of the time it looks like it's based on research. So there's now, everyone's got quite clever with the marketing, and they're taking some sort of research into whether it's a ketogenic diet or fermented foods or whatever it is, and then everyone's jumping on board, but it's not necessarily the right way to go for that particular person, because everyone is different in how their body responds to food. So there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of frustration and sense of helplessness with our patients who have all of these chronic conditions or symptoms and aren't really getting the benefits, and they think they're doing the right thing because they're following the guidelines, or they're following what appears to be based on research but isn't necessarily applicable to them.
Absolutely. And I think dopamine's a big driver as well, in terms of, especially in today's society when we are so overscheduled and stressed, and dopamine is basically, I want it and I want it now. And certainly hearing the message of, oh, it won't, a little bit won't hurt, or I deserve it. Absolutely. You do deserve something. You do deserve a special treat for you, but that need not be something that's necessarily going to make you more unhealthy. And I sometimes wonder if we were able to, take off our skin and take off everything and look at ourselves flat on a desk in front of us, and to go, oh, I'm just going to pop, I'm just going to eat this, and I just want to follow it through and see what happens to my body when I do that. I sometimes in my brain think about these things and think, how wonderful would that be to be able to do that? That game, that kids game where you've got the tweezers and the operation. Is it called
the
operation?
Organs and the little organs, and it's surgical.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I just think it would be lovely to be able to actually in real time see what we're doing to our bodies, because I know for a fact that I certainly wouldn't be reaching for that, whatever it is, if I knew that once I had that, or even like a quick voice command that said, if you eat this, this is what's going to happen.
That'd be great. That's you're right. It is, we don't see it. We see it externally, but we don't make that connection that it's partially driven by our diet and lifestyle, the changes that we see on the skin. But one thing that is really important to understand, because people find the thought of never having their favorite food seems overwhelming, and it's not about never having it. It's about, if you are unhealthy, it's really about restoring your health, and restoring the gut microbiome and reducing inflammation, because once you optimize your health, your gut microbiome is more resilient to that special treat every now and then. If that special treat becomes a daily thing, then you'll revert back to where you were. But at the time when your gut microbiome is restored, or it's functioning better, you actually don't want it. You don't want it. You don't have the cravings go, and the way your brain functions changes. You're able to override cravings better because of the difference in activity of the brain that's been noted, on functional MRIs. That's if the signals from the body are better and the signals from the gut to the brain are improved, then you actually don't want this. So while it seems overwhelming to begin with, it's actually something that isn't that big an issue when you when everything's functioning well.
And in terms of when we are in inflammation and when we're not, when our gut biome and when we're not functioning well, what effects does that have on our cognitive abilities, or our ability to process thought and to think and so forth, but also on our emotional health? Our mental health?
Well, huge. There is, that gut-brain connection is pretty well established now. We know that the gut microbiome produces the whole spectrum of neurotransmitters, and they're transmitted through the vagus nerve, which is a nerve that has its nerve endings all the way along the gastrointestinal tract. It's always detecting what's happening there, and it's transmitted to the brain within milliseconds. So sometimes a food can produce an effect on the brain very rapidly. And so as far as your question as to how it changes our brain function, if you are eating processed foods, the production of neurotransmitters by the gut microbiome changes, and what the vagus nerve detects changes. And then you've also got the direct signals through the bloodstream of the food components like sugar and saturated fats and other toxins that will have a direct effect on the brain. And ultimately what's been noted, what's been really noted well in the research is the brain of people with obesity, where they have an overactive emotional area of the brain. The limbic system is overactive. They're more likely to have anxiety and depression and other mood disorders. And an underactive prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making and overriding cravings. So you have changes in these functional areas of the brain that aren't working for you anymore. Part of it is because of inflammation in the brain. And then to rewire that, if you're continuing to eat foods that are contributing to the inflammation in the brain, it's almost impossible. The reason for that is that to rewire the brain and increase activity in the right parts and reduce it in other parts, you need a growth factor, and that growth factor is released when there is no inflammation. So inflammation prevents the release of growth factor, which means it prevents the ability to develop new healthy habits, really, and different ways of viewing food and life and everything. So people are always stuck in this cycle. They're always going back, and it's because you really need this multifactorial protocol for at least a period of time where you really just stay away from everything that's contributing to, or as much as possible. Obviously, we can't stay away from everything because we're exposed to it all the time. But at the very least, what you put in your mouth, we can control that.
We can control that. And it's interesting because the people who you describe in terms of those with these chronic health issues will then be put on polypharmacy. So they'll then be put on lots of different medications. So it might start with one medication, and then to treat the symptoms or the side effects of that medication, they'll be put on something else. And then to treat the side effects of that medication, they'll be put on something else. So by the end of it, next thing you know, they can be on upwards of 15 different medications. So it's an interesting idea in terms of, what comes first and how you go about gaining that little bit of control back. And especially through something like you said that we have control of, which is our nutritional health, which is what we essentially put in our mouths every single day. So what would you say is the best way for nutritional health kind of thing, nutritional medicine?
So there's a whole field of medicine called psychonutrition. I mean, it's not traditional medicine, but there is a psychonutrition. It's fascinating, and
Never
it's
heard
really
of it.
all about,
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really all about how foods affect brain health, and ultimately whether you are successful in achieving long-term health and establishing the habits. It depends on how your brain functions. And it's very hard to change. So all you need to do, you don't want your brain, as soon as your brain realizes that you're trying to change it, so it tells you, it says, oh, you can have a little bit, as soon as you start to feel better, you get these, you hear it in your own, I hear it sometimes too, and that's what sets you back. But small changes, you have to change in a way to trick your brain so it doesn't know what's happening, so that there's also homeostatic responses that occur. So if you change too much at one time, you're going to feel very uncomfortable. And not only that, your body will fight back with these homeostatic responses because they want to restore the natural baseline. So your metabolism could drop if you're not eating enough, your appetite increases, and it's really hard to fight those physiological urges. So it's really about taking it slow and also feeding the body what it needs, because if you are supplying the body with the nutrients that it needs to support cell functions, that means you're also supporting brain function, then everything just falls into place. And and what I found is when I first introduced nutritional medicine, I started with just a standard protocol, a dietary protocol. I didn't introduce nutrients just yet. It wasn't until I introduced nutrients and what I found with that standard protocol is that firstly, patients lost weight. They came to me every week and they were very happy they were losing weight, but they were hanging out for the end of their protocol, their 12-week protocol, so they could just go and drink and eat whatever they want. So the whole time there were no real changes in the brain. When I started to add nutrients and I started to personalize the diets, that's when there were significant changes to how they felt, so that by the end of the protocol, they were saying, I actually never want to go back to what I was doing. And it's that kind of relief from the control that food has over you that really indicates that there have been some changes made in the brain. I don't have the evidence for that. This is anecdotal.
This is anecdotal.
This is anecdotal. This is my clinical experience, but it's now going out into other clinics and it's the clinical experience of other practitioners. So hopefully at some point we may be able to collate the data and turn this into something. But there is a lot of, and in the field of psychonutrition, that really explains why that's the case. And it needs to be done in a way that's very systematic, that's very tailored to the individual, because everyone's different in how they respond to foods, and that is dependent on their genes, the inflammatory profile that they have, their metabolic profile, their hormonal, and this is based on symptoms, really. 80% of diagnoses are based on symptoms. I think tests are, for many cases, are just a formality.
Well, that's like with menopause or perimenopause. They talk about, your hormone levels, depending on your blood test, your hormone levels could be different depending on what day it is, depending on what time of the day it is, depending on what you've just eaten. So it's more so for menopausal women or perimenopausal women, it should be more about treating symptoms as opposed to, looking at those results per se. So nutrients, talk to us about what you created, because there's a huge need. We can hear that. We can hear what's happening out there. We can hear what you endured yourself. And as a result of that call to action, you created something really special. And I really want you to tell everyone about that now.
So I created two things. One's the personalized nutrition plans, which are online. There are 72 different versions and very much tailored to the individual. And I think the two go hand in hand. And the MyAlly, which I can see you have there in the background. So that's a nutraceutical formulation. It's a TGA listed complementary medicine. So that differentiates it from a food grade supplement. And there are distinct differences, because when you ask for a TGA listing, so for this to be a TGA listed, not TGA approved, they're two different things, but this is TGA listed, is that we have to supply evidence for the benefits of the ingredients in humans at the dose that's in the formulation. So as a result of making sure that every ingredient is at a dose that has a therapeutic claim attached to it, over 60 claims that we can make, because of the ingredients that are in there. So what I wanted to do with this formula is look at restoring and supporting those physiological factors that I was telling you that become disrupted. So there are prebiotics, which is food for the gut, for healthy gut bacteria. There are polyphenols in there, also food for healthy gut bacteria. Polyphenols also help to reduce inflammation and oxidative stress in the body. They also help to, and in the brain, which is fantastic. There are ones that are targeted specifically for the brain. And obviously, if you reduce inflammation in the brain, then you are supporting the release of that growth factor, so that establishing healthy habits and solidifying them becomes a bit easier. There's metabolic supplements in there. There's also, which is basically green tea. So there's not many as far as metabolism. Metabolism falls into place when you reduce inflammation, but we do have a lot of anti-inflammatory nutrients in there. There are nutrients for mitochondrial function, which is such an important factor, because what is known is that mitochondrial dysfunction occurs with chronic disease. So anyone with any chronic illness, obesity, even overweight, has some degree of mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria support provide the energy for all of our cells so that the cells can perform the roles that they're supposed to perform. So if you're not getting that energy, cells aren't working, you're not getting regeneration, you're not getting cell turnover, you're accumulating damaged components within the cells, damaged cells. And this is something that happens in the skin, where there's an accumulation of senescent cells, where these are those zombie cells that they're alive, but they don't function, and they just release inflammatory cytokines, so signals. It's not great. So this is about supporting mitochondrial function so that you can repair and regenerate, and then supporting neurological health as well, like cognitive function, memory. There are nutrients for that, and even adaptation to stress, because resilience to stress, we're always going to be, stress is part of life. We're not going to be able to avoid that. We do need to employ some stress management techniques, and that's an essential part of the program that I've set up. But there are nutrients to help adapt to stress better, because resilience in that respect is really important.
And I'm just going to let everyone know what, in terms of when we talk about this, what it actually is. Oh gosh, you might not, it's right down the end because there's not much left. It's a powder. It's a powder that you simply, and what I do is I put my powder, I haven't had it this morning because I like to have it around mid-morning. I find that it's better on my tummy mid-morning. And I generally have it in a little bit of water and or a little bit of juice, depending on what I've got. If I've got a little smoothie happening or something like that, and I'll put, it's almost, we call it our shot. We have our morning shot, and I know it's not a good thing to say, especially to the kids. But we mix it up with a spoon, and in fact, you've probably seen me doing it on my socials. And I'll be doing it a lot more in the next month or so, showing what I do, so that I can educate people. But we mix it up, dissolve it up, and then I literally swallow it down, and then I'll get a little bit of water and I'll swirl that water to catch the last little bits of my powder, and I'll drink it until my glass is clean, and that's it. I'm away. It's quick and easy as that. I don't bother putting it in a smoothie or anything like that. I prefer to just have it done and dusted, because the other thing with smoothies is sometimes you'll make it and if you don't get everything out of the smoothie, the NutriBullet, for example, you don't know what amount of my ally you're missing. So I'd rather just have it all in one go. So
that's true. But
and it's got it's got everything. It's got everything in it that you could possibly need. I mean, so you keep telling us about my ally.
One thing I did miss out is that it also supports detoxification. That's really important, because we've accumulated so many toxins over the years, and our natural detox systems are generally overwhelmed. But one thing that I did want to point out is that you were saying you're having it in a shot, which is very bold, and we know why. The formula doesn't taste as like the other formulas out there, and the reason for that, and I do want to, it's something that people need to be aware of, is that because it is nutrient dense, there are no bulking agents, there are no protein powders, because protein powders are generally pro-inflammatory. We know they've got a lot of toxins, and many people will react to them if they're having them on a daily basis. So this is a nutrient formulation. So it tastes very different to the ones out there. I generally recommend putting it in a smoothie for that reason. And most people will find the right combination of fruit and healthy fats, whether it's coconut yogurt or coconut milk or almond milk, and they find the right combination to make it the taste just right for them. But I love it, and a lot of people really like it because it reminds them of lime splice when they were younger.
100%.
But you've got that little bit of bitterness from the polyphenols and the nutrients. It's there in the background. We won't pretend it isn't, but you're going to taste the difference, and then you experience the benefits of a nutrient formulation rather than one that is 90% or 95% excipients, which or additives, which is what the majority tend to be.
So in terms of the food grade nutrient supplements that you're talking about, is that what would you call them nutrient supplements as well?
They come under the banner of nutraceuticals, but the difference is that they may have an ingredient in them, and therefore make a claim about that ingredient, but they don't necessarily have that ingredient at a dose that produces that therapeutic benefit. So that's a real difference. And it's an industry that's not well regulated. So most people are taking a lot of different supplements that may or may not be really producing a benefit.
So where would you tend to find, I mean, obviously you'll find my ally in my clinic from February. We launch in February, and it won't just be in my physical clinic, but we'll actually have it in our online shop as well. Where would you find most food grade things? And then we'll go back to how we can access my ally through the clinic and so forth.
So food grade you'll find in health food stores, online, chemists. They're really everywhere. These are the powders. I don't want to refer to any particular ones, but they're generally the powders that aren't TGA listed. So if there's a TGA listed, a number, that usually has a registration number there. It's not registered, it's listed. And so look out for that. And then the claims that are made on the other the formulations that are TGA listed refer to the ingredient that's present at a particular dose. So with food grade supplements, you can find them everywhere. There's more food grade than what there are TGA listed supplements.
So that TGA listing, is that the number at the bottom of your label
right.
here? Okay, so
Yes.
look for that in terms of if you're currently using a food grade nutraceutical, then chances are it doesn't have a TGA listing.
That's right.
And that's what you want, because the ingredients that are in my ally will actually create changes in your body that are favorable for longevity and happiness and health and no brain fog and things like that. And that's what we want. So
there are also nutrients for skin and hair and nails as well. So there's ones, so you can see on the back there are the indications there listed on the back, plenty of them. And so and vision, for vision as well, to improve vision, to reduce mild arthritis, allergies. So there's a whole range of other benefits. I just listed the main ones, but there's lots of them. So
there's absolutely, I've been using my ally probably now for, oh gosh, maybe about 3 months, I think, perhaps. And I'm not religious. I've been, there are some days when I do, some days when I don't. And it's interesting because what Agnes promotes is that you can be on my ally for 3 to 6 months. And then if your body tells you that you need a break, then have a break of 3 or so months. You don't need to follow something regimentally. You need to listen to your gut, quite literally listen to your gut.
Yeah, absolutely. Your body lets you know. You listen to the signals from your body. It's something that you learn about in the program, in the online program, because I think there really is a lack of protocols with regards to supplements, and people tend to take them indefinitely, and they're taking mega doses, they're doubling up, and it's not necessarily a good thing, because your cells sometimes are forced to perform in a way they're not designed to, and your body just needs a rest, and it will let you know. It's an incredible signaling machine, so you just have to get in tune with it and work out what those signals mean for you.
So tell us a little bit about the health program, and then tell our listeners about how they can access my ally.
Okay, so the health program is based around personalised plans. So patients and clients can sign on for a personalised plan, and they use the link that you provide. And I've developed 72 different personalised plans based on the individual's goals, risk factors, symptoms, inflammatory, metabolic and hormonal symptomatology, and then so they will get one of the 72 plans. So these are the plans that I've been using over the last 10 years or so, and tweaking along the way as more research comes to light. I'm always updating everything as it comes to light, I do. So that alongside, when they register for a plan, they have access to a very comprehensive online program where there's video guidance, so I guide them through, and a lot of educational materials where you learn why certain foods produce a certain effect in the body, and what to eat, when to eat, how to eat according to circadian rhythm. I go through different dietary techniques like intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet, and where they can be potentially used. But this is all incorporated into the personalized plan. So there are certain therapeutic dietary techniques that are incorporated in a way that will work with the individual. So they don't need to look anywhere else.
Mm.
In fact, probably never.
Mm.
Probably never need to look anywhere else. This is something you can use long term. There are 3 stages to the program. So there's a preparation stage, a therapeutic stage, and then a maintenance stage. And you will learn how to adjust your plan as your body changes with time. So there's a very comprehensive program. What I'm doing in February, which is what will be offered through your clinic, is I will be having check-in sessions with me. So every fortnight starting in February. So anyone who signs up for a personalised plan and has access to the online portal will get an invitation to have a Q&A session with me to ask me any questions. I'll guide them along, and we're doing that for 3 months. And then the recordings will be up on the portal, on the program portal as well. So
Yeah, excellent.
so
And
access is through you, sorry.
access, yes, through our
Yes.
clinic. And then if you say, for example, you miss that and you don't do that, you can just start the My Ally, can't you?
And you can absolutely, you can start My Ally, and because you don't have to use both, you can use one or the other. My Ally has all of the indications there that you see at the back. So I have a lot of practitioners who just don't have the time to address the diet, or they have since we launched, they just haven't had the time to address their diet in this period leading up to Christmas, and they've just been using My Ally, and the benefits are there. So arthritis, like symptoms of arthritis resolving, psoriasis resolving, so or reducing, hugely reducing. So the benefits are there, but not that that's what everyone will experience. That I don't want to make those claims because there'll be a very individual results, obviously. But you can just use My Ally, and if at any stage, at any point from here on, and you don't miss that, you don't get in on that first intake before February, you can always join in as soon as you sign up for that. The plans are there forever. So at any point.
Excellent. But certainly from February, you can start taking My Ally, and you can purchase it through our clinic, in the actual bricks and mortar store, and as well as online. And we'll be putting all those links and everything in the show notes for everyone. But oh, it's been fascinating. This is such a fascinating topic, and the whole idea of being able to take control of our own health is really appealing. I mean, it's appealing, especially in 2024, when we feel like we're on a roller coaster of a ride and time's going so fast.
It is, absolutely. And you can take control of your health. There are very safe, and these are safe and effective ways of doing it, safer than pharmaceuticals in most respects. Not that I'm suggesting to stop pharmaceuticals, absolutely not, because they are very effective for symptom control and for severe conditions. But as far as chronic diseases go, considering if the underlying drivers aren't addressed, then you're never really getting on top of the cause. So that's where diet and lifestyle come in.
Absolutely. And if there was just 1 or 2 things that you could leave our listeners with in terms of changes, as well as obviously starting on My Ally, but changes that they can make today, what would they be?
I would say start to reduce your intake of processed foods, ultra processed foods. That would be the first thing, and address stress where possible. Like these are the 2 main areas that really influence our health. And the body has such an incredible regenerative capacity. What I've seen over the last 15 years is many serious chronic conditions resolving. It's just getting the right combination of diet, lifestyle, exercise or movement, stress management, social connectedness, the right one for you. But the potential is there.
Wow. See, that doesn't feel too hard.
No.
Really. In fact, it sounds really enjoyable. Healthy food and reducing stress. I'm up for that.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's just finding the right combination for you. That's what it is.
Oh, Agnes, I've loved chatting with you. I love listening to your webinars and everything as well. I literally could listen to you talk about nutritional medicine forever because you are a wealth of knowledge. Your brain is just, in fact, I'd like to do that operation thing and just, peel off and just get some of the stuff that's in your brain and implant it, like those organs, into my brain.
Thanks, Anita. I think Dan Carter as well. He's at the information. I remember you saying that with Dan Carter, and he's brilliant too, isn't he?
So wonderful.
I want his information as well.
Yeah, he's actually, I would love, I'd love to be in a room with the two of you just sitting there going, wow. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will see you very soon.
Thanks so much for having me, Anita.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this episode, please share. Remember to give it 5 stars and write me a kind review. Remember, kindness always comes back to us. All discussed links will be in our show notes. And until next time, may you revel in your beautiful and unique faces, both today and always.